right along, one of the most important things for your voice is really breathing. On a very basic level, if you didn't have breath, you wouldn't have a voice, because it's your breath that goes through your vocal cords and makes sound in the first place. So it's really important to be able to feel like you can affect this and you can control this in a helpful way. And breathing and get control of it can actually be very helpful when it comes to nerves as well. Because often if you're nervous and you stop yourself and take a few deep breaths, it can really help to calm your body down. A few things that are important to think about when it comes to breathing are that you want it to be as deep and relaxed as possible. The more air you have, the more possibility you have to be able to make sounds with your voice. And you want it to be relaxed. You don't want to be creating any more tension when you're breathing than you possibly need to. So in the same vein then, you want only the helpful movement. This is a very old image that I found on Wikimedia Commons, but it's trying to illustrate that fact that when you're breathing, you should just have your torso moving out. You shouldn't have your shoulders moving up or down. They don't really need to go anywhere. Technically, your back could be moving a little bit, because if people train really well, they can get their back to move when they're breathing. But really, it's just a minimal amount of movement that your body should be doing when you're breathing. And if you find yourself lifting your shoulders or doing anything sort of strange when you're trying to breathe, you probably don't need to be doing it. You can try getting rid of that. The other important thing to think about is taking your time. Often, when we're speaking, we get so intent on trying to communicate what we're saying that we stop to pause to actually breathe. And if you don't pause to breathe, then you don't really have the breath to be able to say a lot of those things. So one of the things is just making sure you actually take the time to stop and breathe. And it can make an incredible difference when it comes to making sure that you're speaking in a nice, relaxed way. So next little exercise doesn't involve any speaking, but I'd like you to just start paying attention to how you're breathing right now. Notice how long it takes you to breathe in and breathe out. And I'd like you to just play with that a bit. See if you can breathe in over a longer period of time, and see if you can actually exhale over a longer period of time as well. And think about it and see if it is deep. Does it feel like your breath is really deep and relaxed? If you try extending your breath, see if you can extend it even just a little bit more. Take a little bit longer to breathe in than you did the last time. And then take a little bit longer to breathe out than that time as well. And now maybe switch it up and see if you can breathe in really quickly, but in a relaxed way. Can you just sort of open yourself and then all of a sudden go, and can you breathe out really quickly in a relaxed way? It's an interesting thing to play with, and there is an exercise on the handout that you can try that involves consciously trying to manipulate how many counts you breathe in and breathe out over. And the interesting thing is really just thinking about the fact you can control it. I mean, yes, you're not going to breathe the same. You're not going to breathe over a very long, extended period of time in all situations where you're speaking. But having that sense you can control your breath, and you can breathe in quickly, taking a lot of breath in, or that you can actually use the breath you take in and extend it out over a long period of time to talk. Those are the kinds of things that it's important to know that you can do. And so playing around with practicing breathing can actually help you to start achieving some of that. The next thing that I'd like to do does actually involve you speaking a bit. And it's just a small little exercise to illustrate one basic principle that often people don't realize, which is volume is entirely dependent on breath. So basically, the more breath you pass through your vocal cords, the louder you're going to be. And when it comes to being loud, that's all you should need to think about. Often when we think about being loud, if we're in a situation like this where I am right now, we start thinking about wanting to project. We may have the tendency to lift our chins up. We may have that sense of, oh no, now I have to speak really loudly. When really, all we should be doing is speaking in the same way we are to someone next to us, but just using more air. So this little exercise is going to sort of help you to experiment with that. Basically, all I'm going to ask you to do is say this little sentence several times. It's, can you hear me if you can't see it? And all I'm going to do is switch the imagined context that you're saying it in. So I'm going to switch between, for example, asking you to whisper it to somebody whose ear was right next to you. Then I'll ask you to say the sentence again, but that time picturing somebody standing right next to you. The next time I might ask you to say it imagining that it was somebody on the other side of the room. And I'll change the imagined context. So all I want you to do is think about saying this sentence, but think about being in a different situation, and just say it with whatever volume seems appropriate to that situation. But notice what your body does when you think of that new situation, because that's the important thing, is seeing what habits you might have about adapting to different situations. Does that make sense? Does anyone have questions about what I'm asking? Okay. So first of all, just picture yourself, you've got someone right next to you, you're going to whisper in their ear. And if we all just take a breath in and then say, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Great. Picture somebody standing right next to you, colleague you're speaking to, take a breath in and say the sentence.
Can you hear me?
Perfect. Somebody say, sitting across the table from you, if you're having dinner with them, take a breath in.
Can you hear me?
Back to somebody whispering. Take a breath in. Great. Now picture somebody on the other side of the room, about the distance from me to the door, and picture them, take a breath in, and say the sentence to them.
Can you hear me?
Back to the whisper. And the colleague next to you.
Can you?
And now, without getting any more tense, the colleague across the room.
Can you hear me?
Back to somebody standing right next to you. Now picture somebody who's at the other end of the block. You want to be relaxed, just take in breath and try to pass as much breath through your voice as possible.
Can you hear me?
Now back to the person standing right next to you. Just as relaxed as that, picture someone at the other end of the block.
Can you hear me?
And back to somebody across the room.
Can you hear me?
And somebody standing right next to you.
Can you hear me?
And somebody you're whispering to. And now you may have noticed your body react in various ways. If we had more time, I'd love to go through, because when I've done this before, people have really interesting things that they've noticed about what their bodies do when they're trying to do this activity. But since we don't have very much time, I'll just have to share some that people have told me before. Certainly some people say that as soon as they have to deal with somebody very far away, their body tenses. It's like even just thinking about that situation makes them physically tense. And it's a really important thing to notice, because if you're automatically doing that, then it's not necessarily even that in this case you were having to communicate. It's not the fact that, I was trying to ask somebody that distance away if they could hear me. It's the fact my body has gotten into the habit of associating certain distances with certain amounts of tension. And those are important things to note so that you can actually start to change them. The other important thing to some people realize is just the fact that they aren't used to breathing and putting that much air through, and that when you do so, you tend to try to force your voice out. So really, you should be able to take exactly the same sort of tone or speaking very loudly, and you shouldn't have to change your voice that much. You shouldn't have to change the pitch of it. You shouldn't have to change the effort that it takes to speak. And those are the kinds of things that you want to be paying attention to in terms of trying to speak loudly, but in a loud